Hello, this is Eileen, the environmental educator, and today we're going to talk about a man who we did a video about the other night, Mr. Mr. Bobby Kennedy Jr. And I did a video about him the other night. Is he really the environmental voice he says he is? But since Bobby's out here talking about vaccines and something that the Truth Independent media will cover. The independent media is giving Bobby press. They're doing interviews with him. So this right here is Christy Lee. I don't know, she worked for a long time, like in mainstream, I guess, and then she went independent recently. And here she's doing an interview, but it's an InfoWars interview. And then we also have a Steve Bannon interview here with Bobby. So you have to wonder, now, if Bobby were out talking environment, would these people be giving him press? Because, these InfoWars and Steve, I've submitted to Steve, hey, let's, give the people real environmental information. And that hasn't happened. But all of the independent media, their only thing they will convey about the environment is global warming is not real, so end of story. They will not do any real, good, truthful information. And so it really makes you wonder, would they be having Bobby around if he wasn't talking their language about vaccines? So, let's take a look at Bobby here. This is the Children's Health Defense, where Bobby, he right here is on the board of directors, and he was named Time Magazine's Heroes of the Planet. Oh, for his success helping Riverkeeper to fight and restore the Hudson River, which was no minor task, but that does not mean his reputation as a resolute defender of the environment is true and children's health, because helping waterways is only a very small part of what the environment needs. And Bobby Kennedy has been refusing to give the world the solutions the world needs since the 90s. Definitely after I met his brother Joe, and it was like January or February. It was after their brother Michael died skiing in Aspen. And so it was like January, February 98. And I told Joe, get this to Bobby too, because Joe was going to get it to Al, get it past Al's subordinates to Al, because, oh my God, of course Al would be on solutions, right? I'm like, get it. And Joe never said he'd give it to Bobby, but how did he not? Okay. And then in the video I did about Bobby, it had to have been Bobby. Believe me, I was there. He tried to get on a chairlift with me in Vail until Vail top management stopped him. But, I would also email the water keepers and be like, hey, Bobby, you and your buddies, this is what the world needs, and, but, here's Bobby. He's always will take that publicity, and he is proud when people, call him a defender of the environment. And Bobby, is that really true? So, but here, he says the greatest crisis that America faces today is the chronic disease epidemic in America's children. And, the way you get democracy to function is by informing the public. Oh, Bobby, that goes for the environment too. And, there's too many sick children. And what are the known culprits? Let's see. Let's take a look here. Because, Bobby's out there getting a lot of press because he talks about vaccines. And yet, right here, the Children's Health Defense Organization, Bobby's organization, the known culprits. Oh, what's that? Number 3, climate change. Number 3. way above vaccines down here at the bottom. And then we have 5G and wireless. Do you hear Bobby talking about 5G wireless? Nope. Flame retardants, fluoride, well, that goes in the water. Food additives, lead, mercury. Pesticides, they get sprayed on plants. People eat them. When they're sprayed, they get into the air, so people inhale them. And then, it rains and they get into the ground, and then they get into groundwater sources, so then people drink them. So, then he talks about plasticizers. Oh, okay. And what are they? Well, they're used to help flexibility and viscosity. And, look what he's showing here. A disposable plastic water bottle. That wouldn't be here if we had gotten on board the solutions the world needs and ended our disposable society. So, Bobby. But, right here, now that's still above vaccines at the bottom. Vaccines is number 14. If you count these down, climate change is number 3. Is Bobby out there talking climate change anymore? No. Bobby has truly given up on environmental talk, really. He will bask in praise, but is he out there? Have you heard him out there? If you search Bobby Kennedy, right now, I just went out and searched Bobby Kennedy Jr. activist, and what is it? Vaccines. That's not much about climate out there anymore when it comes to Bobby. But right here, number 3, climate change is a bigger impact to kids' health than vaccines that he is out there getting endless press for. And now let's listen to a little bit of what Bobby has to say. We're not going to listen to all of it, but some of it.
I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm the chairman of the board and the senior prosecuting attorney for Children's Health Defense. The greatest crisis that America faces today, as big as any of our environmental crises, is the chronic disease epidemic in America's children. The generation of American children born after 1990 are arguably the sickest generation in the history of our country, with chronic ailments and pediatric rates of some chronic conditions that are the highest in the world. For example, according to CDC, 1 in every 6 American children has been diagnosed with a developmental disability such as autism, ADD, ADHD, or learning disabilities. And according to HHS, an astonishing 54% of American children has a chronic disease like rheumatoid arthritis or juvenile diabetes. Our children today are wandering around in a toxic soup. We need to do the science, and we need to figure out which one of these chemicals and these exposures is causing these problems in our children. And
okay, so we skipped some there.
And I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to fight for your children, and I need your support, because the forces that I'm up against are forces that have been able to compromise every major institution in our democracy. And the people who stand up against them get crushed. But I know how to fight them, because I've spent a lifetime fighting big shots and fighting bullies. And that's who they are, and that's who we're dealing with today. People who have that arrogance of power. People who believe that they can get away with anything, including destroying the lives of our children. I'm not going to let them do that. And I am going to fight to the last day of my life with the last bit of energy I have to make sure that we get justice for these children, to make sure that we can produce now a healthy generation of American children that doesn't have this epidemic of neurological and other injuries. And I will spend the rest of my life fighting to make sure that no other child in this country or any other country suffers this kind of unnecessary injury again. And I will die with my boots on fighting for these children.
He will. He will. He will die with his boots on fighting for these kids. But you know what? You don't have to fight. And what do you talk about there? The powerful people that get away with things? You mean like your buddy Al Gore and McKibben and people who have occupied the White House, like the Clintons and Barack and all of Congress and everybody you know in the environmental network who's very powerful, including the NRDC who you worked for, Bobby? You were one of their lead attorneys in the 90s and the early 2000s when you were definitely made aware of the environmental educator and education, and the NRDC, since shortly after November 93, when the environmental educator started, had been refusing the solutions the world needs. Bobby, you have to stand up to the NRDC, your old employer, who was preventing the solutions the world needs while you were simultaneously preventing the solutions the world needs while you were working for them in the 90s and early 2000s, along with all of your buddies. But what did Bobby say here that's important that we have to, let's re-listen to something. Okay, right here.
The greatest crisis that America faces today is bigger.
The greatest crisis that America faces today. Greatest, that means on the top, above everything else.
That America faces today as big as any of our environmental crises.
Oh, wait a sec. I'm sorry. The greatest, and then as big as any of our environmental crises. Plural. Plural to the environmental crises. So we have the biggest environmental crisis, the biggest crisis that's out there today. Let's see this again.
The greatest crisis that America faces today, as big as any of our environmental crises, is
the greatest, and then as big as. So greatest would put it on the top of everything, but then when you say as big as all of our environmental crises, they become equal. Okay, so Bobby, the environment wouldn't be there. It still wouldn't be a crisis if anybody had allowed solutions since November 93. And why is that important? Oh, I know why. Because it's also number 3 of your known culprits for being a hazard to children's health, which is what your Children's Health Defense Organization is working to prevent. Okay, so Bobby, but let's take a listen to some of these interviews. First, we're going to hear how the independent media right now today is introducing Bobby.
Fresh off my latest YouTube strike, welcome to KLIM.news, Christy Lee Independent Media, where you'll find exclusive content. And by exclusive, I mean purposefully excluding censorship-loving YouTube. My guest today is no stranger to censorship. Well, the mainstream news would rather have you know him as an anti-vaxxer or a member of the Dirty Dozen of misinformation. We're going to give credit where credit is due. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the founder of Waterkeeper Alliance, as well as founder, chairman of the board, and chief legal counsel for Children's Health Defense, and of counsel to Morgan & Morgan, a nationwide personal injury practice. Mr. Kennedy is an esteemed author, of course, with a long list of published books, including the New York Times bestseller, Crimes Against Nature. His reputation as a resolute defender of the environment and children's health stems from a litany of successful legal actions. He received recognition for his role in the landmark victory against Monsanto, as well as in the DuPont case that inspired the movie Dark Waters. So welcome to the show, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Welcome, Bobby. Welcome. Because, Bobby, all of the other media, they're horrible. They censor. And you know what? Now, Christy, I've been hitting her up since this interview, and she has shown no interest in giving actual environmental news. Okay, and she is doing this interview. This was on InfoWars, and they have been censoring, along with all other independent truth media, anything responsible environment including the solutions the world needs, and exposing all of the fraudulent environmental voices out there, including a lot of your buddies, including your old employer, the NRDC, and including you, Bobby. But hey, they're bowing to Bobby now, because Bobby's talking vaccines. And that's something that they'll put in the press. Here's Mike Adams.
Also want to mention this week, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book is out and it's available for sale. It's called The Real Anthony Fauci. And he actually gives me some credit in the intro. I mean, he mentions me by name, which, I usually don't get a mention from anyone who's typically a Democrat, but, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not a typical Democrat. This guy's a real American hero, and we have helped tremendously to help publicize his work and his book and Children's Health Defense. They're doing extraordinary work. And, history is going to celebrate the efforts of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I believe, very strongly. He is a true American hero. So get his book. Help support him.
Yeah, get his book. Help support him. Because the Children's Health Defense, they are doing incredible work. Now, if Bobby said, hey, Mike, I'm out here talking about climate change because that's actually way higher up there in the known culprits, would Mike be giving him that type of intro? I don't think so. And with Mike, that wasn't even an intro. Mike was just talking about Bobby. I would love to hear, Mike interview Bobby because he'd be drooling all over him, talking about vaxes. And then if Bobby brought up the environment, all these people would probably shut the interview down. But now here's Steve Bannon wrapping up the interview he did with Bobby.
Bobby Kennedy, Godspeed. You're a good man and a warrior. Merry Christmas, sir. A stunning book. Everybody in this country's got to get it, got to read it, got to share it. Thank you very much for joining us in the War Room.
Yeah, you walk on water, Bobby.
And when I sat down in 2005 at the request of a mother who had vaccinated her child and read through a big pile of scientific studies, but before I was halfway through, I recognized that there was a giant delta between what the public health agencies and the pharmaceutical companies were telling Americans about vaccine safety and what the actual published peer-reviewed science said. And that got me, that kind of brought me into this vortex. And by the way, my motive, a report.
That's not important there, but, that's what got Bobby into the vaccines. Okay. But now Bobby's been an environmental activist forever. Climate change is right there. Number 3, Bobby's been presented this in a very digestible, can't be argued against format too. But where's Bobby with using his voice for this, or getting his NRDC, who he was one of the lead counsels for at the time, to care, to actually step up to the plate and get solutions the world needs implemented? Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. So because of their absolute, complete unwillingness to do their job, climate change is still here. And so Bobby's gotten plenty of information that should have gotten him involved with actual real solutions. But nope, not for the environment.
So like you said, this is really about a locus of control, really about power for them. And to that end, though, since we're examining their conflicts of interest or motivations, what would you say are your motivations in being critical of Fauci and the COVID-19 vaccines?
Well, my motivation is to get the truth out,
Get the truth out, because the truth is what matters. The truth will set you free. It's about the truth. And as we're going to hear coming up here too, it's definitely about tyranny, because we can't have the tyranny that's being imposed. So here's some more.
And if you look at kind of the worst tyrants in history, that's what motivated them, is a broad control over humanity. And that is the central ambition of the totalitarian state. Control over every aspect of human behavior, right?
And that's coming down environmentally too.
Coronavirus. And a lot of the people who were part of Event 21 now move into key places in government to manage the coronavirus response. So they've been schooled that the way that you respond to a public health crisis is by imposing totalitarian controls.
Oh, and the same totalitarian controls that were taken on today because we don't have environmental solutions.
Shows that the Event 201, which was this pandemic simulation, which was really a blueprint for how do you use the pandemic as a pretense for imposing totalitarian controls and obliterating democracy and constitutional rights. If you go to Seminar 4, which you can go to.
Okay, but he reiterated that point. First it was with Christy Lee, and then he reiterated it to Steve Bannon there. And now he talks about that training that everybody got. Listen to this.
And you can get in touch with us at Children's Health Defense and come join us, support us. We're litigating. We have probably 40 cases in litigation now. They're all designed to get up to the Supreme Court where we can finally get some justice and where we can, fight this totalitarian, this turnkey totalitarianism that is about to impose.
Totalitarianism. I did a video.
What I found when I was writing the book, which I detail, is this was not a one-off event. They were doing these drills, these pandemic simulations for 20 years. Beginning in 1999, they did and every year they are doing these pandemic simulations, which now involve hundreds of thousands of people, we understand. They were secret, but they were bringing in people from, police departments, from hospital systems, frontline workers, from all over the country, utility people, oil company executives and workers who are all involved in these pandemics, which each one of them drilled. They never talk about public health. They never talk about how to repurpose medications, how to quarantine the sick, how to get people to eat vitamin D and zinc and exercise and build their immune system. There's none of that discussion. It's all about how do you use a pandemic as a pretense to obliterate democracy. And they were doing it simultaneously.
And we can't have that. And so now the thing is, did you hear me said, these went on for decades. They've been going on for a long time. And they've involved people over a wide spectrum of professions. But now if they've been doing this because of medical issues, that just now we just had a pandemic, yeah, okay. But they impose this medical tyranny, and now they are going to impose climate tyranny. Have they been having all of these trainings for the environment too? Were they just under the heading of both, medical and because we don't have environmental solutions? So I don't know, but I know that they are definitely, and the carbon tax here, that's the least of your worries, and to what they have planned coming up for you, even though it's going to financially cripple people.
I've already mentioned the climate credit card, but beyond that, we have the International Energy Agency. We have a UK government-funded report. We have the organs of the United States government all promoting the idea of climate lockdowns. We have climate activists announcing that in a declared climate emergency, you only be able to fly when it's morally justifiable. In other words, you're going to need if you want to travel to Florida for a vacation, not going to cut it. If you're going for a funeral, maybe. If you've only had one funeral that year, you'll have to justify this.
Okay, right here. Here's COVID with the vaccine mandates and the tyranny based on Yeah, okay. An event that isn't really happening, and here they are, they're going to change it out for climate change, including the tyranny. So take note of that.
Chuck Schumer is urging Joe Biden right now to declare a national climate emergency. It would turn the United States into a blue state like Cuomo or Whitmer in Michigan, where they would suspend elements of democracy and start being able to oppose interstate travel restrictions, all sorts of even dietary restrictions, energy restrictions. We're already getting reports about smart meters, turning people's air conditioner off in the summer if they make it too cold, or their heaters off. This is a level of control Americans have never accepted, but the COVID lockdown softened us up, and this is what we're headed for.
So this is you.
Yeah. Oh, there's more.
The Soros Gates funded professor who came up with the phrase, they're the ones who said we need to go from COVID lockdowns to, quote, climate lockdowns, unquote. They actually use that phrase themselves, climate lockdowns. And you're exactly right. This is not a Chinese social credit system someday in the future in the United States. This is that Chinese Communist Party style social credit system right here and now in America. It's arrived.
It's here. It's here.
So if you don't go along with the carbon footprint, you're going to be denied banking, access to credit. We have the federal government under Joe Biden doing what's called environment social governance. Department of Treasury is now going to be withholding bank credit ratings to institutions that lend to energy extraction. In other words, unless you're doing the approved what benefits China, solar, wind, or electric car batteries, you're not going to get money for energy, and banking and lending institutions won't be able to give it to you.
And Mark,
Yeah. And here's Dave Hodges.
This is unbelievable. A credit card, and it's from MasterCard, working with a committee in the United Nations whose name is too long to remember to pronounce.
Okay, the United Nations, who has been refusing the environmental solutions the world needs since the 90s. Okay. So remember that.
If you make purchases that violate your CO2 credit allocation on your credit card, boop, you're cut off. You're saying, you gotta be kidding.
Yep, the same. And the United Nations that announces climate tyranny as official policy worldwide. And what did Charlie Chester tell us?
We're going to start focusing mainly on climate, like global warming. Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying that that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
Yep, awareness. No, they're going to scare you so that you just bow to the mandates and the tyranny that Bobby is opposed to. Bobby is here on record opposed to.
You know, my motive, a reporter called me yesterday and asked me whether I had a profit motive, a personal profit motive in doing this kind of advocacy. And I said to her, this is the opposite of a profit motive, because probably I've lost 80% of my income because of what I'm doing, along with a lot of friendships and, you know, and damaged relationships, even with people in my family. So it has not been something that pays off, but I think it's important. I think we have to protect children, and we have to, you know, fight for democracy. We have to fight for our personal freedoms. We've lost all of these extraordinary freedoms during the last year. Really, our entire Bill of Rights has been the subject to a kind of controlled demolition.
So we gotta, you know, not have the tyranny. We gotta keep our rights. We gotta fight for the kids. Okay, Bobby.
There's never been a pandemic in history where that was the solution. There's never been doctors who were told don't do anything for a patient who is sick. There's plenty of things. We know that this disease is manageable using repurposed medications.
And you know what else we know, Bobby? We know that the environment could have been solved decades ago with manageable solutions that would have then, as we've been through here, not had climate change be number 3 on the list of known culprits for children's health today. Okay, Bobby?
It's unlike, Tony Fauci never told the American people, you need to take vitamin D. He never told Americans you need to lose weight, stop drinking sugar drinks, take care of yourself.
Well, I mean, isn't it true that
Well, you know what, Bobby? You and all environmental voices never told the people they need to get environmentally literate. They need to end our disposable society, to end their disposable life. Because if people stop buying disposables, then we wouldn't have a disposable society. It would be problem solved. And then we need individual cooperation, okay, which is really easy to do. And that smokestack that you show with the pollution coming out of it, we could cut energy use by 40% simply by turning off unused electricity, or electricity use by 40%. And then, we could work on such things like not turning on lights during daylight hours, which wouldn't impact anything except children's health and a lot of environmental betterment. There's a lot we can be doing. There's a lot that you and nobody else told the people. Hemp, I mean, that's a no-brainer, but we need leadership by example, Bobby. When environmental voices are out there leading environmentally abusive lives and big homes and Gore's $2,500 a month electric bill and flying around in private jets, the average American doesn't think that their much less abusive life is a problem. But, our environmental problems, which have turned into children's health problems, are the direct results of each individual's irresponsible daily actions, which are easily correctable and easily replaced with responsible actions. And that includes you, Bobby. It was, May or June of 2006, 2007. I was over in Sun Valley and I was in a store. I said this in the video I did about you the other night. And it was just me and the lady working and another lady. And the two of them were talking because one of them was coming to pick you up at the airport when you were flying in, I think to do an environmental talk. And you were flying in your private jet. And so, these two women, the lady who picked you up, she talked about that for a month, I can assure you, because I was just randomly in a store listening to her and she was falling all over herself because, oh my God, Bobby Kennedy, oh my God. And then I completely shut her down because I'm like, Bobby, you're going to pick Bobby Kennedy, Mr. Environmental himself, at the airport, coming in on a private plane, private jet? Oh, then she couldn't get me out the door fast enough. But see what the problem is, Bobby? Okay. So, you know what? In all these years, no environmental voice has told people how to live responsibly and that we need them to. And now that is a huge, right here, your own website, that right here has become a much bigger problem for kids' health than vaccines. Okay, Bobby?
So as a lifelong Democrat, I imagine you would be pretty critical of President Trump. But I'm finding that even the diehard fans are now becoming more critical of Trump, especially in light of him continuing to brag about these vaccines and continuing to have kept Fauci as the leader in this and the rush through vaccines. So I was curious, do you blame him in part for what we're now dealing with?
Well, I tend to blame the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership. And President Trump for allowing, Dr. Fauci to run the show for a year and two. Except, I think President Trump had good instincts.
Bobby, the Democrats and Republicans, they're responsible for a lot of our environmental problems because they won't have any leadership. But more importantly is all of the environmental voices who put themselves in business to be the leadership that in America, you're not supposed to have the government leading everything. It's supposed to be the independent people, the private organizations. And that's you and all your buddies in the NRDC that you worked for and your Water Keepers organization. Okay, that's all of your buddies that are the problem, which is now why, number 3 on the known culprits for children's health issues is climate change. Because you and all of your buddies, Democrats and Republicans, have refused to give the world the solution. I know you're not smart enough to come up with solutions, none of you, but the solutions the world needs have been put on your desk, and none of you can care. So you are Dr. Fauci, okay? Don't kid yourself.
My question is, we have observed at the very least poor public health messaging from Dr. Fauci, and at the most what appears to be perjury or gross negligence. So where do you see this going? Do we have hope for any accountability?
Well, it's unclear whether, that's what we're working towards, and we're looking at litigation. We're working with prosecutors. We're doing everything we need to do to make sure that these people can be brought to justice. But if you look at Dr. Fauci's record, it's really extraordinary that he's still in office because
like all the environmental voices, okay, like the NRDC. Like Al Gore and Bill McKibben and their complete proven failure organizations, proven by every global report every single year, stating things are getting worse even faster than expected. Yet all of these people are out there going to solve the problem, and they've been doing this for decades, and they haven't. Every year it gets worse and worse and worse. And
people who I've always respected, people like Noam Chomsky and Salman Rushdie and Naomi Klein.
Naomi Klein. Now she is someone who won't allow solutions either, but she's got a name out there because she's always announcing we need solutions. Now she doesn't have solutions. You don't get in the network of all the environmental voices if you have solutions, just if you're screaming for them and you won't allow them. And that includes Naomi Klein. And she's actually a very difficult person to get in touch with. I think I've used like a form on her website or something, but most recently she is with The Intercept. And, she even held a night for Greta. That's in my Greta is a Preventing Solutions Fraud video. And, oh my God, they were honoring Greta, of course. And The Intercept hosted it. And, The Intercept top editor and second-in-chief editor, they're on my daily distribution, not daily, but my big distribution quite often. They know that Greta's a fraud. They know there's solutions out there. I've told them, get this to Naomi. So Naomi is no one to be idolizing, Bobby. The person that has the solutions the world needs is the person that you, along with everyone else, have been keeping at the curb, not letting into the games, because not letting in to achieve, to tell the people, what they can do, like you criticize Fauci for not doing. So, Bobby?
Or have any mainstream media, because I know all that, has anybody reached out and said, hey, I read this thing, it's kind of fascinating, can you walk me through it, even behind the scenes? Has anybody shown any interest whatsoever in actually understanding the facts or using this as a tutorial? Are people now, because it's so fact-based, so evidence-based, so data-based, what we call science, not scientism. Has anybody come to you and said, hey, we really want to understand what went on?
So right here, Steve Bannon.
Tucker Carlson.
Okay, so Tucker and some other person said it. But right here, Steve Bannon is putting down the mainstream press because the mainstream press won't tell about vaxes like Steve and all the independent media does. Well, you know what? Steve and all the independent media won't say about the environment. Environmentally, they are the exact same as the mainstream media. So let's put this back on Steve. Hi, right here in this thing to the Children's Health Defense, because they're looking for a reporter. And I'm like, no. I need to be more than a reporter, but I'll apply for that job. And in here, I talk about turning the tides right here on Steve and telling Steve, you can read this. This is what I'm going to be submitting in the job application. I'm going to do right here online, and so you can read. I say, get it to Bobby, and you can read whatever I say in here, blah blah blah. But put this back on Steve, and put this back on Christy Lee, and put this on Mike Adams, and put this on everybody that's out there interviewing you about vaxes, Bobby, and tell them that we've got to start talking climate and that the world needs them to finally get on board and not just be out there spewing that global warming isn't real, so end of conversation. Put it back on Steve, Bobby. So here we are, right here. Here is their job application. They are looking for, right down here at the bottom, a reporter. So I filled this out here. I didn't put my address or my phone number, but here's that letter that I just showed you. And right here, right now, we are going to submit this. So thanks for your application. Oh, I'm sure that I will be hearing from them soon. And so what I'm also going to do right here is I'm going to send that exact same letter right here. And I sent it to info at. We'll hit the sent folder here. I sent this the other day. I tested to see if, I'm sorry, info at Children's Health Defense Org was a valid email, and it has not come back to me. it has not come back to me. So right here, right now, we just sent this, and I say get this to Bobby immediately. Blah blah blah. We need to actually get working so that Children's Health Defense combats number 3, well above vaccines, on their list of why children's health is such a major issue today. So I do try to keep these short, people. This is the truth of Bobby and his children's health, and even the independent press out there. And are they really the people that they say they are? Are they really the news that they say they are? They will not, absolutely will not provide you good environmental information. They censor, and they are proud to censor anything that is good environmental education, and they are proud to censor. They give all of these environmental voices that they mock, like Gore and Greta and everybody, because they're horrible people. They're out there on this false agenda. And trust me, if Bobby Kennedy were out there yapping that children's health is because of climate change, he wouldn't be getting any of this press. So Bobby's got to turn the tables on them and say, Steve Bannon, yeah, I'll come back and do an interview with you again. And we got to talk about other things that affect children's health. But is Bobby ever going to give you the environmental solutions the world needs? Well, Bobby hasn't since the late 90s. So stay tuned, people. This is the only place you will get this truth. I am the only person who knows it. No media will tell you this, not even today's independent truth media, and certainly not Bobby Kennedy Jr. himself. And am I going to get employed by the Children's Health Defense? I'm not holding my breath waiting. So stay tuned, people. This is important.